Now, the last time we worked on this, we did one side of the gear block installation. And so the next thing, of course, we'll do this off camera, but I wanted to share some cool pictures with you first. While we're going to be doing this off camera, there is some really neat stuff. I'm sure this will jog a lot of people's memories. You know how I always say, there's just a lot of things in life beside model aviation, and boy, there sure are in my case. This is from our friend Mike, and I'm going to spell his name, J-A-T-C-K-O. But I want to pronounce it wrong. Now, he knew that we had talked on the phone. He's thinking about buying a Sato 40, but he hasn't made up his mind yet. He sent me these pictures to put on a video of his custom car. And this is one of two custom cars that he has sent pictures of. He didn't realize the first car I ever had was a very similar car. I had a 49 Merc. Very similar. And we all did the same thing back then. They tried to replace the grill, and boy, this brings back a lot of memories. I'm sure there are some people out there that, well, Ray Moore, for one, from New York City, he had one of these cars, exactly the same car, by the way, that had one of those bunny hop things that they jump up and down. But boy, certain things just bring back memories. You know what? When you think about something from my childhood anyway, look at the size of the steering wheel. The horn ring is bigger than a Toyota steering wheel. I mean, just look at the size of the steering wheel. He's got the taillights all molded in. And by the way, this is a significant thing. This is where I learned to use Bondo. I could never afford to have a decent car. So we'd buy these $10, $20 specials and hammer out the bodywork and Bondo them. And it looks like he's got a honey here. I have to tell you, Mike, I wish you lived closer. I'd love to go get a ride on this in video. Ray Moore's car was absolutely show quality, and he used to drive it around. Wow, that brings back some... If this doesn't bring back memories, then you're older than I am. Holy mackerel, 3 deuces. Very cool. And the other car, and again, he did not write a caption for this, but 57 Chevy. Bob Whiteley had an awesome 57 Chevy. And here's some of the things we always love to see somebody's workshop. It looks like he's got quite an Air Force. Some of the planes in his collection. Here's some of the motors in his collection. And after that trip to Bob Zambelli's, that's just going to be a hard act to follow for me. Ringmaster. A plane that he said he couldn't identify. It looks like it might be some kind of a, I don't know. To be honest, I don't know. This looks like a chipmunk, maybe. Look by the elevators, that looks like it might be a chipmunk. A Bipe. He said some of these planes are really old. He doesn't know how old, but very old. And he said the oldest one of all, saved this one for last, is his Nobler. It's so old he doesn't even know how old it is. Well, you know what, Mike? I'm so old my wife doesn't know how old I am. She only knows how old I've been feeling lately since this operation. Anyway, he's a Pampa member, a cool guy, and it just shows you how everybody you think they're just interested in model airplanes, or they're just interested in certain things. Now, in my case, I love the trains. I love these kind of cars. I love everything old when it comes to cars. The older the better, in fact. Motorcycles. I mean, birds. I don't know what we don't share. I mean, it'd probably be easier to make a list of stuff we don't share. Speaking of cars, if you go back a little bit, Bob Zambelli had sent me this video. I'm making a copy for somebody, where the guy went through the streets of Paris at 200 miles an hour. Almost killed 7, 8, 10 people. Very interesting. But anyway, cars, motorcycles, birds. I don't know. I think there's a lot in life to interest everybody. Well, in a rather painless session, we now have 2 gear blocks. Even though we're not going to have any time to work on this later today, we'll pick this up tomorrow morning. Just getting one little step like that out of the way. Every time I can get one little step forward instead of backward, just makes it that much easier. And it gives me more to look forward to here. Well, this is the kind of winter it's been, and this is what I have to do every morning. Enjoy. I have to make sure that we have bubblers in the ice, and you can see what a job this is. Whew. It's been almost, God, it's been over a month, probably a month and a half, since this has not been frozen. What a mess. And our beautiful backyard that used to be so, so full of flowers. But if you want to have pets, this is the price you have to pay. All part of winter with Windy and Karen. Boy, it's cold out there. It's up to about 14 degrees today. Up to. And I have to chop that ice every day. Unbelievable job. Chicky, I need some help here. I need some of your expert advice. Could you come and help me for a little while? You can see. He's going to be a big help today, I can tell. Okay, previously we had finished both sides of the gear block installation, and I was really happy the way that came out. Again, one of my little pet things I like to see really nice is nice gear block installation. Now, the next job on this is going to be, and I only have about an hour tonight to work on this. Karen has some family things we're going to be planning, but what I need to do is I need to locate this former on the other side of the wing, exactly the same former, but I need to account for the thickness of the wing. Now, there's 2 things I have to do. I have to make a paper pattern that's going to locate this in this dimension. So that little paper pattern is going to locate my other half of the former. Otherwise, what would happen is when I go to make this piece that's going to go on the back, it would have a step, or it would be not even, or it would be crooked. In other words, I need to know that I'm going right through and coming out the other side of the wing with that pattern. Now, there's probably a lot of different ways to do it, but I thought in my case the easiest way is just to make a paper pattern for that spot. So by doing it this way, now that piece, once I trace this and cut this out, that's going to be my set point. So when I flip this, I have this, hopefully, I've transposed that. Now, I originally thought of another way of doing it. And of course, I could shove 2 pins down through the wing or something, but rather not do that. I think I'd rather do it this way and try to locate that and also keep it at 90 degrees to center. It's not 90 degrees from this face of the wing, it's 90 degrees to center. So the first thing I have to figure now is exactly where that former is going to be, so I can get these relationships as close as possible. Now, one way to do this, of course we'll check the former itself, but this is one way I think that'll work for us. Stay down there. See, a lot of times laying out a complex shape like this, it really takes a lot of time and energy to lay something out that when somebody looks at it, they just say, oh yeah. Well, the first time you make some semi-scale formers, I think you'll really be impressed with how long it takes to do it. Anybody that's ever done this and never figured out all the patterns and shapes, now that's going to have to go around. And this just basically locates, all we're looking to do is locate that top former as close as possible to being where we want it to be. Then the other decision we have to make is we have to figure out how thick the wing is at this point and take that amount out of a former. We have these cross-grain formers made up. We have to take that amount out of a former so that this side is not too big or too small. Okay, that should hopefully get us started with our alignment. Now we got to reverse this. Again, this is just a rough or a double check of how we want to actually do this. This is going to be just up just a little bit. Locating this piece is going to be kind of a critical thing too. I want to be right up on the front. Okay, that'll be close enough to get us started. Now we have to figure out the thickness of this former. And now we got to figure out the height, and it's the height that's going to be critical. Okay, now I know this is my pattern for the bottom. But what I need to do is make up the entire circle, take this pattern, and deduct. It looks like just less than an inch. It's actually 9/10. It's a little thicker on one side than the other. Just eyeballing it up, I'll leave it oversized. And once I check that it's oversized, then I can do this. I can pretty much get the height that way. So for all that it's worth, I guess I could do it this way too. Just referencing down. Probably, it looks like it's a little more than an inch. But what I need to do is, well, I need to make some formers anyway. I need to make these oversized, maybe 1.5 inches, then just cut enough off, because this die, here's what's going to change. This is not going to be this wide, it's going to be narrower. So I'm going to have to come in from each side equally, almost as if I'm working off a center, but this is going to be a box to work with. Now just imagine how hokey this would look if this former is off one way or another. So locating just this one former is going to be a very time-consuming thing, and getting it the right shape. It's going to be more time-consuming than possibly I originally thought, but even if I get one done tonight, I'm trying to work on this little by little by little. And I'm certainly not trying to rush it through, but I like to, like Verizon, I like to see progress every day. Now I just made this way oversized just to see. Wow, oversized by the thickness of the ruler. Okay, so it won't be much of a big deal until I get the part the size I want. I'm just going to take sliver after sliver off of this, until I have this alignment right. And it looks like we have to take off the thickness, exactly the thickness of the ruler. Another dry fit just to see where we are. And it looks like, whoop, trying to center it, of course. Looks like we have that pretty close at last. Now, as a double check, kind of a double check what I did here, I tried to establish what I thought was a center line. And the way to do this is to find a midpoint. Then once you have the midpoint, and you can see I've adjusted it once already before I made it final, that now from that point up is now the center line. Now the only thing it doesn't take into account is the wing taper, but I have to start somewhere. I have to know that I'm at least close to being in the middle, so that when I drop this down, and I can use the little dots I have up on the part, and this just is like a double check. And it really looks like very close to that's very close to where it's going to be. Now I even did what I thought was an overkill of overkill alignment, because these formers are going to set us up. What I tried to do is eyeball it, and your eyeball is really pretty accurate when you come down to it. Look at where that is, line this up in essence, and then look right down the ruler and see we're really close. We're off by maybe a 64th of an inch. I have this piece tack glued in here, so I can move that now. Just a 64th of an inch, and I think we've got that alignment pretty well worked out for that former. Okay, one former in place. Looks pretty accurate. Again, we're trying to make it as accurate as possible. Next step, and I'll do this off camera, is just replicate everything I did on that side on this side. And I want to get those, if I get those two formers in tonight, I'll just be thrilled to death. There's a lot of ways to check the alignment, and I've been looking for a lot of even double check ways. Because pretty much it looks like what we're going to wind up doing is carving this gigantic block and hollowing it out for the back. And I'm not sure if we're going to do that or make a mold. Not sure what we're going to do here. I would love to make that piece out of carbon fiber, but I'm not sure it's going to pay until I actually look at how long it's going to take to carve the first piece. And again, we'll look at having both choices. But before we get too carried away, I want to get this other piece in. And even a little step like this, we're one step further into the program than we were, earlier today. So, small steps, like Verizon. Make small steps every day. Make one former every day. I like that. Anyway, got to tell you the greatest news of all. Warren Walker got the Red Baron today. He just called me. And it blew me away. He was as happy as could be. Really excited about it. He's going to cut a piece of it up and put it on his wall of honor, which I guess is where it belongs. But the Red Baron, still alive and well, driving people crazy. Now, how long ago that was? Boy, look at how these young gentlemen here up in Crow. And just think, boy, if I only could have looked into the future and seen it in 2004, my good friend Warren Walker would have the Red Baron. He'd literally be the Red Baron. Now we got both of these glued in place, and they really look like, well, again, it looks like our little fake templating system worked reasonably well. all the double checks that I built into this seem to work okay. We're going to pull this off now. And now I need to figure out, well, I probably won't have time to do it tonight, but I need to figure out, I need one more former maybe right in the middle here. I need to figure out, and it will be very easy now because I can connect the dots and just figure how thick it has to be. It should be relatively easy to figure out where that former needs to go. In fact, we probably need two of them, just looking at the way this laid out. Maybe two of them. Again, I'll have to think about it overnight, think about what I want to do with that tomorrow. You're probably thinking, well, gee whiz, it takes a long time to put these formers in. You spend a whole session, maybe 3 or 4 hours, and only get 2 formers in. Well, when they're lined up the way they should be, I guess it's worth it. I'm looking down these formers now and thinking, looked at it from a lot of different angles. Looks like we have that angle worked out just about perfect, because what we want to have is a flat surface here. Again, we're going to find out when we go to make the back end of the nacelles. In the meantime, I'm going to replicate pretty much everything I've already done to figure out if I want to get 1 or 2 formers in here and put them both on the same side. That'll be relatively easy now that we've got. Once you have the both ends done, dropping formers in between is easy. It's when you have one here and you need to put one way out here that it gets relatively difficult. Now, just to make my point, I remember spending hour after hour and night after night on alignment with this plane, lining things up. And you know what? The first day I flew it, and I remember that first day like it was yesterday. That was one of the, I don't know, most enjoyable days I've ever had at the field when Brian yelled out, "Hey, it doesn't loop!" Well, when I remember the first time I pulled it out and it stayed flat, I said, oh, it's like a sigh of relief. Like having the winning lottery ticket. But all these alignments, these have to be really, the minute anything is crazy, boy, you just built yourself a can of worms. That's why I've emphasized in the last couple of videos, never cheat yourself on alignment, no matter what the alignment takes. Even on the simplest profile, the alignment is super critical. And getting all these things lined up, worth its weight in gold the first day you fly the plane. And I was just so happy to hear that Warren Walker enjoyed having that Red Baron. Again, boy, brings you back a lot of memories. That plane had a really long and exciting life. I'll never forget it. And maybe you're at the point, like in your youthful exuberance, that you can't really look 15 years into the future and see what you'll be building. If you stick with model aviation, it could be 15 years from now, you'll have something the equivalent of the Red Baron, plane that brings back a lot of good memories every time I see a picture of it, or every time I talk to Warren about it. Just as a rough way of getting some of these formers put in place, I've decided I'm going to try to get away with 1 former here. It gives me a real rough alignment, and of course they're so small I can just make them a little bit bigger or smaller until I'm real happy with how that's going to work. Kind of sight down and see that it looks like we have pretty decent alignment here. Anyway, once that's done, we'll get this other one done off camera and we're done for the day. It's really getting late. And believe it or not, more snow is on the way. Just what I need. More ice, more snow. I think all my birds are on welfare out there. I've been feeding them 5 times a day. Could have a puppy for what these birds. Speaking of birds, Chicky. He was a big help today. Yeah, big help. Anyway, we're going to work on this tomorrow. We get those formers in. If I finish that tonight, I'll just be thrilled. It just takes time. This is something, until you actually do it, you think, oh, you could cut this out with paper dolls and it would all snap together. But it's all these alignments that take so much time. It's just a time consumer. Okay, very productive day. Looks like we have everything in really good alignment here. I'm really happy with the way this worked out. Took a lot of extra time. It's not as obvious right in the beginning that time is worth it. But the next session we're going to try to make some skins. We got to put some lightning holes up on the top of these doublers. We'll do that before we set the skins up. We can do that because those parts have plywood alignment on both sides. But main thing of all is to get to this point, and this is the point at which it really is, we're ready for the top skins. This is just turning on a day-by-day basis, just getting more and more exciting to work on. It really is a lot of fun to work on this. Before we pack it in, we can chalk off one more thing on our production schedule. Okay, we got the final lightning holes in here. And on the next session we're going to try to make the top skins. Now give me some time tonight to think about making up these patterns, skins, whatever. We have several extra pieces molded up already, pre-molded, in case we have problems with that. Anyway, this was such a superior way to do it then. Even if right now we started putting strips in here like we did on the B-25, well, we got that whole thing with the weight of the glue not there and hopefully a better piece of wood than we would have been able to strip off otherwise. But all that glue and all that sanding, many hours of trying to sand those glue seams out. So I really think this is going to just be superior in a lot of ways, and we hope lighter and actually more integrity and possibly even a little bit better looking. You won't see the glue seams eventually as years go by. The thing we really are looking forward to is many more years of flying the B-25. That just can't describe the... I had a really special treat today, something I want to share with everybody. This, of course, is the 614. 614 is a restored steam engine. It comes through Rutherford in the past, usually twice a year. Karen and I have in fact, we have a great videotape. We took this train ride. It's an 87-mile train ride. It takes 12 hours to go up to Point Jervis and back. Now, what was neat is, on one of the times that I was actually on the train, George Venturini took some still pictures that to this day he's given me sets time after time again just for my own collection. But the 614 is a very special engine, and it's really something that look at this, Karen, look at her curly hair. And now I went over to see George today. George wasn't feeling so good, and he's had some medical issues, and he's cut his hand up pretty bad. But we were talking about the 614, and without him even mentioning, I mean, we just were talking. He says, you know, I've been holding up a surprise for you. I haven't really, he was going to give it to me before, and of course it's not long ago his wife passed away. And he's renovating his shop and doing a lot of other things. But the old 614, what he did is he made me a painting. And this is for my train room, and it's a signed oil painting by George. He also has the, in fact, I want to show you what's really special about this. Just look off to the right. Look who's in the picture here. It's Wendy with his video camera. Now just think about that for 1 minute. So that's going to, at some point in time, we're going to get it framed. It's a signed oil painting by George. And every time I see it, I'll remember those great times of, first off, what we used to do. It's on one of the videos even, when It's on one of the Nats videos, in fact. When I got up on a signal bridge and the train went underneath me, blew me off. Look, if you look here, look, there's the Twin Towers in the background. Look at that, the Twin Towers. Oh my God, this brings back memories. Now, who would have ever thought when we were shooting this video, and here's the old 614, and we're all getting ready to take a very innocent train ride, that not long after it, we would have had that 9/11, the tragedy of 9/11. But anyway, a great video. And now I have the matching picture, and actually it's the first oil painting I've ever been in. And special thanks to George. We're going to be going over to his new shop. Look at that Windy with his video camera. Actually, what I should have had him do is paint in the Twin Towers here. That would have just been special. But anyway, something special, something non-model aviation, but yet something that, hard to believe how much fun it was riding on that 614. I'm going to put a minute or so to run-bys from this, because when we were up on this this steam excursion, they turned it on a roundhouse by hand. What they have is a, it's pretty cool. There's only two of these turntables left in the state of New Jersey. This is one of them. And they had to turn it with a bulldozer. They have a bulldozer actually turning it. Of course, it's live. And then what they do, they set up to do a whole bunch of run-bys, and these run-bys are really nice. If you've ever been on a steam excursion, if you've never taken a steam train ride, just once, take one. Spend the money, spend the time. You know what? In our lifetime, at some point in time, there just aren't going to be any more steam engines. There's very, very few left, and the few that are, it's a part of our life that, actually the 614 is part of my life. Just check this run-by out. I'll put this on in real time. Very, very cool. Even Karen enjoyed this. This was a 12-hour steam train ride. And they get this puppy up to about 80 miles an hour on the straight sections, going up the mountains. Battery right at the end. Well, we're back home, and it was an absolutely fantastic trip. Absolutely. The weather was great. We did about the last one-third of the trip back in the dark, pitch darkness, and needless to say, there was a little medical emergency. They had to take somebody off the train. They had to make an emergency stop. Anyway, that's just part of it. I wanted to run right through this book real quick. It had some nostalgic pictures in it. They give you this book when you're on the trip. And it had, again, it's just brought back a lot of memories of when I was a kid. I was a kid out in Long Island where the Long Island Railroad used to go by. Here's some pictures when they rehabbed the motor. 1.5, just going to hit the high spots here, 1.5 million to rebuild this engine. It took them a year and a half to do it in Hagerstown, Maryland. They have a list of all the cars here. They had 2 or 3, I think there was 3 open window cars. They had a dining car on board, which was kind of cool if you wanted to have some snacks. This almost looks like some of the footage I was trying to take. Again, I put it on the Shop Series videos. some of the old pictures of the steam locomotives. A really well done trip. I really can't say enough for the people that put the trip out. Karen and I are planning on joining the Museum Society so that they'll preserve more and more of the heritage of the steam engines and keep trips like this available. There's just so many people that really, at least in my lifetime, might miss ever seeing a steam engine. And we were full of, Karen and I were both full of chips when we got home, the little embers and chips from being in the car. But believe me, this is a once-in-a-lifetime adventure, and I just thought you guys would enjoy sharing it with me. I'm going to finish off the part of the tape that I have left. I ran out of batteries, of course. The part I've left with some other steam railroad footage, and hope that you'll enjoy this tape and pass it on to somebody that, in turn, maybe some of your friends have some interest in railroading, would enjoy some of the other footage on here. So thanks for sharing the trip with us. It was a good time. It really was a special time.
Yeah, I hope you enjoyed that, and maybe give you some insight into why I enjoy model railroading as well as model aviation. And what was amazing, and it just reminded me, looking at that little brochure, this engine was pulling 24 if you count them, 24 fully loaded. Believe me, you couldn't get a seat on this. We had to buy our ticket a year ahead of time. This is one of the biggest attractions here in northern Jersey, is when the 614 comes through town. They absolutely line the tracks. The whole route that we went, the 87 miles, people were on both sides of the tracks taking pictures. Anyway, we will have this in a place of honor up in the train room shortly. We'll get it framed. And it's always good sharing our adventures with our friends. Especially, now that we have people like Warren Walker that share Mustang rides, and Bob Zambelli with some of that Ferrari footage he sent. There's a whole world of interesting things out there. And model aviation is certainly one thing among many. And in the world of model aviation, to me, there's a lot of interesting things, but this A26 is one of them. Now we're going to pick this up today. I'm going to try to make up what amounts to be a pattern for the skins. I have a couple of pieces of molded wood extra, and I'll use the one that didn't come out the best just to try to make a rough pattern here. Now once I get a pattern, hopefully I can, and I know I can't interchange them because of the rake and because of the angle of the wing, but I can get it real close. I can get a good starting point. So I'm going to start with, well, I guess I'll start with the inner nacelle and just start working on making up a pattern here. Now what I did, I made up a bunch of these pieces already, and I have some that have little cuts in them and some that didn't come out so nice. This one's got a big gouge in it. So I can use one of these, if hopefully one of these will make a reasonably good start for a pattern. But we're going to use the method that we used in the past of just dropping a piece down, cutting pieces away, drop it down, and it gets very, very time consuming. But in the end, what we've saved is all the glue seams, and there just would be hundreds of them on I'll bet on a B-25 there's 100 strips making these nacelles. So in the end, I think this is a weight saver and a time saver, and just makes for a nicer job. As long and tedious as this is to make these patterns, I think the end result is you really have something a lot better functionally than if you did it the old-fashioned way. And it just seems like, well, in my case, it's just something I enjoy, working with molded anything, especially molded balsa. I've looked at a lot of different ways to get this started. I have this, which is going to be my skin pattern, and it's really rough. It really needs a lot of adjustment, but it does give you a place to start. And what this is going to give me is a starting point for one side. Now, even though this normally would be on the other side, so everything is slanted that way, but I still get a rough idea of where that's going to start. And I can look at this side and get an idea where we're going to have to wind up with this. We're going to wind up, of course, much further, because this piece is going to come in But what they typically call this on most bombers, especially on these, is a Coke bottle shape. It goes around and then back out. And I'm not sure what the purpose of that was, but it seems like most of the World War II bombers take advantage of that. Maybe they get some lift out of that or something. But anyway, this is just a rough pattern. Now, I know I'm going to wind up with these slices much further up into the wing. So just by looking at this, there's a couple of things I can pick off of this relatively easy. I know that I'm going to need this dimension more of wood when I make the first cut into my pattern. I'll leave a little bit extra, in fact, because we're going to ultimately need a lot less. And this will allow this skin to pretty much go straight down. And this is just going to be the roughest of rough cuts for the first side. And that should allow me a little bit extra wood and should allow that to drop down. Now, remember, on each side, these two stagger in two different dimensions, up and down and side to side. But you have to start somewhere. So what I'll do is I'll start here, but I'll leave just, in fact, I don't want to change the front, but I'll leave a little bit of extra material on here so I have some room. Let's call it fudge room, sheetrock room, something. Rumpus room. So if I make the first cut a little oversized, that'll give me a little chance at dropping that down in place. Again, I've left plenty of extra material just to get some idea, and you know what? It's a good thing I left that extra material. It's actually closer than I thought it would be. I need to probably now take, where's my pen? To get a start on this, I need to take off probably, and I'll use my hand here, maybe a 1/16 or so off of this. Just the least little bit. Now you can bet we're going to go back and forth here 20 times before we get this to where we're happy with it. And we still need to take a little bit off back here, but it looks like we have that seam started okay. Sometimes when you get close, the easiest way is to just find a little high spot. So the days I spent with John DiTavio doing sheetrock work, boy, they have paid off in giving me some little ideas about how to go about fitting patterns like this. But they're all building blocks. Once you learn one way of doing things, it's always easy to figure out how you can make balsa wood sheetrock, balsa wood, machine shop work. It all ties together somewhere. Okay, now I'm not going any closer than this. I'm going to do the rest of this with a little sanding until I get the exact shape I want, and this fit to be even a little oversized, but not that I have a gap there. Okay, now what we need to do is basically start on this side. The first thing I need to know is where is the leading edge going to reside, so I can look down the part, pick up what will be the leading edge, and just kind of draw a little line. And that tells me where the leading edge is going to wind up. Now I don't know how far up this part. It's probably going to be quite a ways. But I do have the other side of this, which I know matches the other side of the wing, so I can start somewhere. And I always would recommend starting, this part we can just let overlap, I would recommend starting way further up, leaving the material on, and then each step just go up, up, up a little bit until we get that top the way we want it. And if I go too far, of course, I can tack glue on a piece of material so that I'll have a very rough pattern. But without this pattern, I'll never get this onto a good piece of wood the way I want it. Even if we just start here, give us a rough cut, leave it a little bit oversized. As opposed to how long this would take to fit all of the joints in the planking method from the that we used on a B-25. Now a good way to know is roughly where this is going to be right is I can kind of figure where this is going to be. Right about here I can see this is going to be way oversized, but I'd much rather start. And once you have this idea to start oversized and then start fitting it in. Don't try to cut the whole thing in one shot. You'll almost never get it. You just waste a piece of molded wood. Really way oversized still. And now I'm gonna basically just take. I'm basically gonna go up here, maybe another, maybe do a quarter of an inch because I know we're still way off. I need to know that the leading edge is going to be here. And eventually these two are going to come together to this dimension, and then I can sight from the back and the front, and when I have a tight fit front and back, I hope this will drop right in with the minimum, with a nice fit or a shim on each side. But this, if this fits the way I hope it does, this is really going to make for a nice, well, it'll also be a giant help to Mike when he does his nacelles. Needless to say, as we get closer and closer, you want to start off maybe taking a quarter of an inch, then an eighth, then a 16th, and maybe at the end, a very tiny amount. Okay, now I can see, just by looking at this, I can see I have a hard spot here that's not allowing me to have a really accurate fit. I have one side really nice and accurate, but I need to take the old pen the way we did before, and this will give me a better, I hope, a better fit. It's not pressing down the way it should. Again, just one little piece after a time. It gets time consuming, but in the end I hope we're going to have a nice quality job. Roughly what we're doing, starting with the big cutout and and now we're up to just doing it in very, very thin slices, and or using a sanding block to just get rid of a little bit at a time, because once you go too far, then you got to start gluing pieces back on, and then you're not a whole lot better than when you're doing that sheeting, the planking thing. Suggest, you see, we molded a lot of these parts all at once. When you're going to mold parts, mold a bunch of extra ones, because then you're not tempted to. First off, what you can do, you can weigh them, and see, in this case we have the weights written on them, but you can use the heaviest one to make a pattern, and then the lightest one for your inboard, or assuming you have a twin engine plane, or if you don't, of course, there's you'd always want to put the heavier wood out on the outboard wing anyway, but having these pieces molded up, it just makes the whole thing, you have a little more confidence when you're making these cuts. Oh, this is still oversized by a good amount. We know we still have oversized here by an amount, a good amount, but we're starting to get down to where we can start to see some progress here. This side looks to be as good as it's going to get. And I can kind of keep this side on, if I can do that. I know I'm still going to have to take a little bit more out here, so let me line this up. I have to kind of fudge the leading edge now, because we're getting down to the point where this is going to start dropping down quicker and quicker into the leading edge. You can't get the pen to go around the way it should. But there's also another thing you have to take into the final account when you're doing this kind of a fit. We call that the Coke bottle fit for whatever reason. When you have a part it's laying on a flat fuselage side, you can just take a tracing of the wing. But when it's in a curved part, it's a parallax view. This curve gets bigger and bigger up here as you go into the curve. So I've had to change what was the airfoil, and I've been doing it little by little by little, to account for this additional curvature. And that's why I think once I figure out what that curve is, now see what I have to do is on this side only take some out really of the high point. That's where that's going to wind up being. This curve is now, it should be this profile, but as you lay it over, it distorts to where you're taking more and more of the high point out. And I don't have a template for that. I kind of have to do it by eye. But I can see that I'm always hitting the hard point of being right on the high point of the wing. So by taking a little material right out of here, and I'm guessing I'm going to have to take, this is just going to get a by eye kind of a thing, just by taking that little bit of material out and then getting this flat. I need this is going to be the most critical thing, is to get this to fit up here just the way we want it to. And that's a whole lot closer, certainly not perfect yet, because we have too much material back here. We still need to take off probably another, and I may as well do it this way, because I want to take less than the pen line off. I want to take a little extra up here so I can allow that, and a little less down at the front. And this is just really a job of interpolation more than anything else. And each time it's just a little sliver, a little sliver, a little sliver. Now we can take that whole piece, and hopefully we're going to be sneaking up on this. Now it starts to get a little exciting when you get down to where it's looking like it may be on the final few cuts here. This side certainly looks okay. And now from this point on, I'm not going to do any cutting. I'm going to try to get every one of the high spots, and I can see where they are, because I also have to take into account this angle. This is laying flat. I don't want to have it on the point. I want to get a good joint there, a nice solid joint, in fact, since that should contribute to some integrity. Anyway, I think that once you see how you can go about doing a fit like this, when I watched George Venturini do some tile work one time, and I guess I picked up more than half of all the little tricks he was using, and those were tricks he had gotten from his father, who had passed them on to him. And what was nice is when it came time to do the tile work in this house, I'm going to be doing some more tile work once I recover fully. We already bought the tile, in fact. Well, now I'm confident doing tile work. I mean, I can kind of make up the rest of the rules as I go along. But in the beginning, if somebody can show you those first couple little do's and don'ts, how to line up grout lines and how to do a good grout job, you can do tile for the rest of your life. It's a priceless little entity. With the skin oversized and kind of a, well, halfway decent fit, we're really getting close, in fact. Now I need to find this little mark in the front and in the back, leave it a little oversized so I can get this joint line. You see this joint line, we're going to remove quite a bit of material here, but I'll leave it down, a good 1/16, because as I push this part down, I want to have a nice, tight, good integrity fit. Hopefully a good cosmetic joint there too. But you can see pretty much step by step by step by step. And all these little imperfections that well, glue dripped there, and we had a little spot here, they're all going to be fixed in a final silver. But Right now I'd like to get that fit, and get this fit down here in as good a form as I can. And I know the back is still a little loose. I may have to put a little shim in the back. The back. Close. We're within a 32nd of an inch there. But you can see how that airfoil distorts because of that curve, and that's the one thing you can't really take into account unless you make a pattern. You just can. Maybe a CAD cam could do that fit for you, but in this case we just don't happen to have a CAD cam here. Find it kind of like a little help to have these pins, these old John Pothier pins. Get this all pinned down as close as possible. And you can see I need to make a little shim there, but that's not a big deal. A little shim there. In fact, what we've done is just taken a little bit too much off. But here's the good reality here is I think we'll use this for kind of a pattern since we have a better piece of wood over there. This will just help us in establishing a pattern. Down here we could just get that. Now we still need to cut the extra material here, but this gives us a good idea of how much still has to get cut off. Transposing that, slicing that off, and I think we will have a final pattern. You can see how I've left both of these sides a little bit oversized because I have plenty of extra material. So what I'll do is just cut this in the same way, leaving it a little bit too big, and then little by little drop it down in place, hopefully getting it in place. And if I do have this kind of a gap, what I'll do is when I use this for a pattern, just put a plus here and let that line go back down out. Always cut that spare material away just a little bit bigger than it has to be, and always have some extra shells just in case. And I think that I basically this, in the little dissertation we've done on video of fitting this skin and the top skin, and of course we're going to make the back cones next very soon. One of the things that it should allow you to make any plane with a round fuselage, any GB, anything that 30s Air Racer, Bearcats, fitting the skins should be, well, a doable proposition for even an average modeler. I don't think any of this stuff is really high tech. It's just time consuming. It's time consuming, you need patience, but when you're done I think the results are going to be very nice, and it's certainly going to be an upgrade over the B25 with all that planking. And you can see on the B25 what that fit ultimately was, but boy, if I remember right, this was days and days of planking. This was not. I'm going to hopefully get one of these skins on tonight and one tomorrow. Maybe even get the second one started today. I don't know. We're sure going to find out. That piece finally cut. Now it's only going to be a couple of swipes with the sandpaper until we can just drop that right in, and then repeat the same thing onto the other side. And if this was the case for making one skin up, I wonder how many cuts less this is than a planking job, a traditional planking job. I don't know, but I'm sure glad I'm not doing another planking job, that's for sure. For any final fit, I need to get that last, well, let me just show this, or maybe I can show it this way. This wing is going to lay in here, so this angle can't be, has to be like a connecting, I guess an easy way would be if we took a sanding block and do it in this dimension, but we've got to get a flat surface as much of the way as possible. And then this last thing is just final sanding in these last little fittings up in the front, and I hope that is going to be, that's a session's work, baby. For my original pattern, and this of course is just a rough pattern we worked on, I had cut this an eighth too short on one side, maybe a quarter. But what I did, I transposed this onto one of the other shells. Now, the only problem with this whole piece was, and I didn't realize, when you transpose this, I didn't allow enough, and you can see the gap. I should have left a little more material. So all I'm going to do is just make a little strip for in there of the scrap that I've already cut off. We basically have, I think that fit is going to be just about as good once that's glued down. That's going to be about as good as possible. Yeah. We've got it tight up in that side. And once you know you have it tight in all the dimensions, once I have that little shim in there, and once that's glued on, this is going to be, well, a giant step forward. A giant leap for mankind. A giant leap for Ricky Rojet here. Let's glue this piece on here. I'm waiting for the glue to kick off. And I'm going to trim this off, and that should bring me back to where I have a whole tight fit. Again, when you put one piece up against another piece to make a pattern, always leave plenty on the bottom. I really left about a 1/16. I should have left like an 1/8 or something. You need to always leave more. In other words, you always shadow the pattern by an 1/8 of an inch more before you drop it in. So there's my little shim, and we should be ready to glue this piece in. Now, I'm going to do it the same way we did the other one. I'm going to put the Elmer's white glue alphatic on the formers I can't reach, press this down and pin it. Once this dries up, which is about an hour, 45 minutes, then I can glue the two back ones on with thin CA and make sure I got even pressure on the whole former. Okay, it's getting late, so what we're going to do is just let that glue dry. Tomorrow morning when we get down here, we want to glue up this edge, and in the back, but I'd like that aliphatic. It's just going to be too late if I keep working on this tonight. And we'll start off a nice fresh day tomorrow with knowing that we're almost halfway through with this one nacelle. This morning, one of the things I want to do, I worked on this last night. Actually, I worked on it late. I was overly thinking about it. But all the glue should be dry in here now. This is dried overnight. What I want to do, I have a piece of tape holding the skin down in place to try to minimize that seam, and I have pins holding the back. So hopefully this is all going to fit in exactly the way I want. All I'm going to need to do now is run thin CA in here and then trim this down, both sides of course. But then the next step I want to do, and I was thinking about this last night, I want to bolt the cowlings in place and make sure I don't have any gaps here or that the cowling isn't lined up. Because basically from this point on, I'm going to start at the front and try to sand this right in place, and then the last thing is to make that tapered piece that goes on the back of the nacelles. Every time I think about how I want to do this, I just try to find a little bit better way of doing it. But I was thinking last night, boy, I don't want to have this where that cowl doesn't line up the way it should. Now, there's a little gap in there I'm going to have to fill, not a big deal. Once I get this on, should seal the top. Now it's just a question, I want to turn this up on its side because I don't want to have the CA run down the side here. Now whenever I'm filling what amounts to be a relatively small gap, one of the ways of sealing it is just let that little, in fact I can take, these pins are not doing anything now, and just let that little trough fill up with sandpaper. Fill up with sanding dust, sandpaper, yep. Yeah, Wendy, have another cup of coffee. And that's where we added the original little shim there. Now I need to turn this up on its side to run the glue seam. To just let that little gap that's there fill up with dust, no matter how you do it. And by having it at this angle, hopefully I won't get a big globberoo on it. That's a new word, globberoo. I'll have to do the same thing on the other side, and then we'll trim this off. Now with all that, last thing left to do is just trim some of this off, block sand it nice and flat. Now what I find important is once I have this all sanded perfectly smooth, hopefully this is a flat surface and we're going to try to cowl fit later, I want to seal this end grain. See, it's sealed down at the bottom, it's not sealed up here. I want to seal that end grain with thin CA. Boy, I'm losing my mind here. Need more coffee. But that'll give me a nice hard edge which the cowl should mount up against. Anyway, these seams worked out just really, you almost can't feel them. That's as good as it gets as far as ever having to plank this. You'd never get that planked with that few seams and that integrity. Had to put a little bit of a shim up here, like a 64th of balsa. But right up here, we're touching on all the seam. I can feel where the former is. Back here, it's nice. I have to trim the back down now, CA the back. Do the same thing up here, do the same thing in the back, and then we should be ready to test fit the cowl. Before I get to the final details here, what I want to do is I have the little polywog that gets in the fillet. Again, I don't want to wait till the very end to do all these little fits and finishes. And getting in here, I put a couple of thin layers of CA in there, a couple of thick layers. Each time I sand it out, I just recoat it with thick CA. And what I find out, if you work this edge in and this edge down, never work it at 45. Just work this edge in. This seems to get the best result in the shortest amount of time. And you can see we've got plenty of little dings. What my philosophy always is as you go along, fix the dings is whenever you have a few spare minutes, work on dings. Because when I get to the end, it's going to be difficult to try to do them all at once. Also, the idea here is because we have this in silver, we can see the mistakes. If we had this in raw wood, you wouldn't see this, for instance. You wouldn't see this little spot. And these little spots you can just, as you see a spot, here's another one. Because we're going to be sanding this silver down even probably more than once again. But now that lets us see what this fillet is going to look like. This joint, I shouldn't say fillet, it's not really a fillet as such. I'm not sure if they call these tadpoles or pollywogs or what, but they're certainly useful tools. Remember, the objective here was, because this is in silver too, we've mounted all our wood parts right to something solid. Now a lot of people ask, well, you know, does glue stick to dope? Well, if you glue it right to, this wood is 16th wood, how strong can that be? But once it's tissued and glassed and everything, it's relatively strong anyway. But I like to keep after all these little spots. As I go along, just keep scuffing them up. The more I can scuff it up, the more when I put that last coat of dope on, or the silver filler, whatever's going to go on here, we don't know yet. That's just going to give me a better chance of getting a nice tooth on it. And there's no substitute for just running your finger in there. You can feel the bad spots. Wherever I feel there's a bad spot, I'm going to work that. Like right here, we got a little bit of the CA that dripped out. A lot of times you're better off just getting a razor blade underneath it. But I want to do this now from this point on, this whole area here. I want this to be smooth before I flip it over and do the top. Now with a little block, and I can get right in this corner here. One little trick I wanted to show. I guess it's not a true trick, but you always want to use your finger. Find any spots, in fact right here I got one, that you're not happy with. But we still don't have any material in the joint where the fillet is, other than the thick CA that we put this together with. So what I want to do is I want to make, this is relatively hard, the silver, the fillet is relatively hard, but the wood isn't. So what I want to do, and this is really the easiest way I know of to do it, is just put a little on there. The purpose of this is that it hardens up. It hardens up the wood so you can sand it. So now that wood is a little bit harder, we know the fillet material, well, we call it material, it's not really fillet material, it's just the thick CA. But the silver is relatively hard, and we've got the wood right up against the fillet relatively hard. So it just lets us get a little bit better of a sanding fit in there. And it wouldn't matter what, every ship is either going to have a fillet or a joint here that you'd like to get as nice as possible. Trouble is, if you make the thick CA too thick, it never really hardens inside. Just stays like chewing gummy. And then I can get right in that, right up to the silver with the edge of the sanding block. And then I can get from this side in. Again, just one more of the jobs that's really, really time consuming. And remember, on a twin engine plane, you have 3 fuselages to do, so it's really 3 times the work. But getting that as smooth as possible right now, very, very important before we move on to the next step. Now the objective is always to get these 2 joints to come right to a 90 degree, no, not a 90 degree, but to a nice even point. It's actually more difficult to make a plane or make a fit where there's no fillet. The fillet is like molding in a Victorian house. It just covers it. The reason Victorians had those wide moldings is they had carpenters that were drunk all the time. Not sure that's true, but sounds good on video. But after I get this fit to where I'm going to be happy with it, here's the next step. And it's another way, just another way you can harden up this little area of wood. What I do is I put the thin CA right on a Q-tip and wipe it real quick and be twisting it. If you hold it in one spot, And what it does, it gives you that little hard edge, just slightly hard edge to work from. And immediately throw the Q-tip away. Do another one. It's usually right up around the leading edge that it's very difficult to get a really perfect fit. Now once that kicks, and that will kick almost instantly, I go back to my block. Fillets always seem to be one of the areas or the joints where people that are judging at the gnat seem to focus in and rub their fingers and rub their noses on it and try to separate the good ones from the not so good ones. So it's always good if you can spend a little extra time. In this case, it's not actually a fillet, but it's a fit. And that step I just did of putting the thin CA on and then roughly just sanding it off with some 320 or 220, I can do that over and over again until I have the fit I want. Right into that corner if we can. Yeah, it's really starting to come along real nice now. And if you feel a bad, oh, I feel one up here. If you feel a bad spot, this is the nice part. You can just go right in there. Couple of swipes, and you got it. Things doing this kind of work around fillets, what happens is you're always wearing the edge of the sandpaper out. So you can see from this block, or actually from any block, what happens is you wear that edge out. Now what I do, and it doesn't matter what grade or what kind of paper it is, just establish a new edge, wear that edge out, and constantly be making yourself a new edge. Otherwise, you're throwing a piece of sandpaper away that really, it's still got a lot of good life on it, working in the corners. Always working in corners, having that tool with the back cut is the whole deal. And then on a smaller tool, this is the smaller one, has a little more of a radius there. So it lets me get a radius rather than a sharp edge. But always just having these tools and knowing how to use the sandpaper the best way. Here's another good trick. When you want to make this radius a little bigger, you want to leave it a little more diameter, put a piece of sandpaper, and you can see what I've done. I've worn the sandpaper out and then move the tool over a little bit. Squeeze this together, that holds it in place. Now you have a nice little tool. But now what happens, if you want to make this a little bit bigger, just put another piece of sandpaper over it. Now what happens, the first piece of sandpaper keeps the second one from moving, and you can really work that real nice. Just a couple little ways you can improve your sanding and maybe in essence save a little sandpaper too along the way. The last step here before I do the cowling fit, I want to put the rest of the lightning holes in that part just to lighten it up. Again, I always like to do the lightning holes after the parts are in place, not before. This gets a lot easier to do it this way. Okay, now the next thing here is I have the cowls bolted in, well, one cowl anyway. And what I want to do is I want to put a piece of tape around the cowl just to protect it, and then block sand this in. You can see it's, of course, just the slightest bit off in spots, but I like to get a perfect fit there. I also marked inside the cowl so we can figure out where our venting is going to go. But that's going to be hopefully a nice sanitary looking nose when that's done. Again, I just keep thinking about that GB. Anyway, just hard to imagine that a couple days ago we didn't have formers, we didn't have nacelles on. This is kind of going together as quickly as I like, maybe even quicker, even though I'm working on it every day. But here's something really special. You got to believe this is funny. Warren Walker got the Red Baron, and he's got the wing put together already. He put it on his shop. He's going to send me some pictures of it all pieced together in one piece. I think that's going to be cool as can be. Anyway, got to get back to working on getting this to be nice and smooth, because the objective is to finish this nacelle tonight up to this point, hopefully, and then tomorrow or the next day or so, get this one done. The reason is because Les has his wing pretty much ready, and what he's going to do is finish up the tips and the flaps in the next day or so, and then I'm going to start putting the finish on it for him, because we want to try to get that plane ready for this spring if possible. So we're going to put this project aside for a while and work on his as soon as we get this cowl sanded in. Now I can just, with the tape on here, I can just rough in where I feel the hard spots are, the spots that are not a good perfect match. So it looks like I have a nice fit in here, but I'm thinking possibly when this is all done I may want to put a piece of 64th plywood in there. That's a good possibility. First we'll see how this all sands out. The tape just acts as a guide. See, on the B-25 we had the cowl flaps, and that made for maybe a little better airflow, but we're going to have a totally different venting system, and I'm not sure how exactly it's going to be, but we're not going to have an exact copy of that when we're done. So we're going to have to pay particular attention to getting this to be an absolute nice tight fit. So we got one final sanded in here. Now what I'm going to try to do tomorrow is, and probably do most of it or all of it off camera, is just repeat everything we did in the last 2 days. And because we're doing it a second time and redundantly, and it's fresh in my memory, it should go a little quicker. This basically was 2 days of work, but I really feel happy about the way this worked out, and I think it really will be an upgrade over the B-25. Again, we'll see, and we'll see tomorrow. Now, as happens so often and can happen, well, very unexpectedly, our plans have changed. Les was originally going to come over today with the wing for me to start putting the finish on for him so he could get moving on some of the other parts of this model, making the molds and things. But didn't work out. We have a big ice storm coming this way, and he decided he didn't want to get caught in here and have to move everything around in the pouring rain and ice. So what I guess I'll do today, guess we have to keep the plan book open. I'm basically going to repeat everything I did on this nacelle as far as the skinning, mating up the cowl, putting the lightning holes in, things like that. And I can really do that off camera because it's going to be very redundant. But it'll be very nice. I keep saying I like to hit these little watersheds. It'll be very nice once both nacelles are done. I really will feel like I've hit a little watershed where we're looking at, it's starting to look more and more like an aeroplane. You know, and when you're working on something that actually looks like an aeroplane instead of a part, it just seems like you get more inspired. So what I'm going to do, again, this is what happens. Every day here is an adventure. I had a lot of things that I was thinking about doing today, but you get an ice storm and everything changes. But luckily I have the table all cleared. I cleared it for less, and I may as well get over there and start working on putting that other nacelle in. And we have some basic patterns we may be able to use, and what we're planning is this later this week, Bill Hummel's going to come down with some show and tell with Noel Drindak and Mike Costello, some of the projects they work on. We've kind of devoted Friday this week to having a show and tell day. I hope a lot of people can enjoy seeing some of these new projects that are evolving. Now, just to show you how crazy the schedule is getting, we already have scheduled Dave Midgley to come down the middle of this month for, I guess he's going to want to work on his plane. But anyway, Woody, the other part of the news is Woody has the carbon plane, that all the parts that Dave previously made, it's done and it's ready to paint. We just don't have any weather to paint it. We were going to try to shoot for this weekend. That didn't work out. But given everything else, I guess with all these gaps and cancellations, I guess we will get to finish this today. Again, I'll do it off camera, but just to show you what a crazy, crazy situation we're working in this winter with the weather and with Les's mom having health issues and some of the other things we really can't control. But I hope in the next day or two we're going to have 2 nacelles done, and I really like the way these look. I am really excited about seeing this. Again, it looks like it happens real quickly on video. It doesn't. It takes days and days and days and days. But we're going to work on this, and hopefully the next time we see this guy, or in a couple of days, we're going to have 2 nacelles finished. And then I really think that from that point on, it's going to really be inspirational to work on every day. I'm going to be straining at the bit to get down here early. Just as a little tip of how I've done this with the bottom skin, you can see this is our pattern, basic rough pattern that we used for this skin. But what happens when we go to transpose it, this side, when that side is correct, what happens here, you can see how different it is. They're not mirror images. So what I have to mark the wood with where the leading edge starts, and then cut that side, and then take the parts apart and cut that side, and then move this basically back that dimension right there. And the thing I learned from doing this whole side that was really significant is when I come over and do the other side, leave everything at least 1/8 of an inch, maybe even more, and do the final fits. You think you're going to cut this from a pattern, it's just going to drop in. Somehow that never happens. It's always just a little bit different in some dimension. But by having it oversized, it takes a little more time, but then you just, hopefully, we'll be able to get this in the next day or so. I'm really excited about moving this project along. I didn't think I was going to be this excited. Believe it or not, this did go a lot quicker than the first one. Boy, oh boy. You don't really see it on the video, but this really, the second one, no, sorry I didn't videotape it, really went a lot quicker. It's amazing how the second time you do something, you can speed it up. Anyway, the last step is going to be just the cowling, and we're ready, baby. You really get the feeling that at some point in time, you really get the feeling it's an A26. And I think we got exactly the right amount of the A26 above the wing as below it, which I didn't know if we were going to have it. But I've looked at several of the pieces of documentation, and that looks just about right. Very similar to the B25. It's this piece that goes over the wing that has to really look right. It's hard to define what it has to look like until you look at pictures of the real aeroplane. But I think also on the B25 we have it, and when we make the tail cone pieces, which is not going to be today, of course. Getting that right amount, it's the proportions and the amount that lets us fudge it and turn a scale plane into a stunt plane. Well, the time really did go a lot faster than I thought it would. Both of the cowls are sanded in and attached. The sheeting is done here. And I had to make a little bit of a decision now how I want to do the air exhausting. Now if you look in here, you can kind of see some of the choices I have. I want to get air where the engine's head is. Some outlets. Now the B-25 has the flaps open, so that leaves a perimeter of air, but this one isn't going to have a perimeter of air, so we've got to figure out some way of putting these in. Now one of the ways we could do it, of course, we could try to make this almost exactly scale, and I've looked at the book. In fact, let me show you what some of the choices are, because as I'm doing it, I'm going to try to make a decision while I'm making the cuts and see how I like the look. I'm not sure exactly how I want to do this yet, but here are the choices that I have. Now this is one of several ways that the real A26 exhausts its exhaust, and of course there are pipes, exhaust pipes from the radial engines, which are leaving the black stains. Now I thought that would be a cool thing to try to airbrush in some way, or even to do this with paint, maybe just to do it with paint, or to figure out just how that would look. Now I remember Keith Trossel had a Bearcat with this just painted on, and it looked very realistic, but the problem is we need to exhaust some air out there too, so we have two problems we want to solve at once here. Now on Mike's plane, which will have the black paint, it probably won't be as obvious, the exhaust stains or whatever. But there's still a thing we have to do to get air out in various directions out of there. Now, of course, if we didn't have these as the real life air outlets when the cowl flaps open, well, we would have fewer choices. Like the B-25, it was just easy just to leave the cowl flaps open, and that did it. But it's one of the neat things that I hope I'm going to be able to airbrush on. Here's a view with the cowl flaps kind of open. And believe me, there's nothing worse than designing up, and I've done plenty of them, design up a air outlet system for your cowl that's inadequate. That overheating on hot days will just make you crazy. So what will happen if we don't get this right? I want to make sure I get it as right as I possibly can. Now I have to deal with several things. On the real plane I have the cowling hold down bolts. I can't run a scoop right through the cowling hold down bolt. That's one consideration. Now also, in an all perfect world, the way this would work is the amount of square inches of area going in should be several times. In fact, ideally it's 6 times bigger. That's going to be difficult to do with small holes around the perimeter because we have quite a bit of swept area going in. But we still have a lot of choices here, and until I actually mock this up and see how this is going to work out, I'm not going to really know whether this is going to, well, I'm not going to know until I fly the plane on a hot day either. But I want to look at all the choices. In the good view where you can see the cowl flaps opening. And believe me, there's going to be a lot of compromises here because we're just not going to be able to make this totally scale as well. If we do make it totally scale, it's not going to be within that 10% rule that we want to stay within with the B-25. Yeah, you can see some of the development that went into the cowlings on the early models that had the lip in the front and some had the lip on the top. So we have both choices, or we can just leave the lip off altogether. We have a lot of choices here, in fact. And that's what's nice about doing a fantasy airplane. We're not locked into anything. Another nice version that's definitely worth considering here is the one with spinners and these big square tip props. That's kind of neat. Well, there are a lot of choices in cowling. This whole front end of the nacelle thing, you really can go many different ways here. And that's why I like to think about this for a while before we cut wood. Another nice thing is when you model in a plane and you have good documentation, you just get a lot of good ideas of how and different ways you'd like to do things. Let me get the phone. All radial engine planes seem to have the same thing in common, of some kind of operating flap mechanism. But I love those exhaust stains going down. I'm looking forward to trying to airbrush those in. Another view of how the cowl flap, how that whole thing works or seems to work. Interesting. A very interesting plane, by the way. So after thinking about this for a few days, what I decided on doing is a rather, not a totally scale rendition of these exhaust outlets, but something that'll kind of capture the flavor of the way the real plane is, rather than trying to make an exact scale copy of it, which I don't think is going to be real productive. I think making something that's a good simulation will be, well, interesting and scale enough for all purposes. Again, we're not making a scale model, but having that flavor, that look that the real airplane has, I think will be important. And I'm going to try to lay this out with tape before I cut any wood, which is always a good way to do it. Now that we have the cowls done, I think it's the most important place to lay out the venting is going to be on the bottom where the head of the motor will be. I need that vent to be, well, as reasonably large as possible. So you don't really want to, I really don't want to make it too unscale-like. I'd like it to have that flavor, that look of having slices going out in a lot of different directions. But to make it totally scale, I would have to go right through some of these attachment bolts, and I don't want to do that. So the easiest way is going to be, I think, again, experimenting is going to be the best thing here, is just to lay this out with tape to get some idea of what it would look like. And always, if you lay it out with tape, you can move it, you can adjust it, you can do a lot of things. Once you cut wood, you either have to glue the wood back or whatever. And this is a significant thing. This is one of the, well, if you look down at the picture on my desk even, it's a significant thing of how the real ship would look. So I'd like to get it as realistic as possible, and yet not have it something that's not going to be functional, or something that's not going to pass enough air that it won't allow the engines to run at their full potential. Seems like the first thing, I'll lay up some tape as a guideline. The thing I'd like to get right about it is the aspect ratio. I don't want these outlets to be too wide and not long enough and too wide. I want to get them relatively in proportion to the way the real ones are on the full-size plane. So what I'm going to do first is just try to lay out. I laid that piece of tape out, put the wide tape here, and that sets that tape in position. Then I can kind of look at how this would look, and I can get some idea as to whether these are going to be relatively scale looking, not scale looking at all, or give up, try again. Always nice to be able to lay things out in tape. That's one of the best tricks I can even recommend to people. Just try laying things out. Now, because we have to deal with a cowl bolt right on the top, we really can't put one where we really would like to have one. And just as an example, I'm looking at how this would lay out. See, because I have to lay it out also. It has to be symmetrical, so I have this main tape running down the center. But again, I can lay this out, go back and forth 15 times. Certainly is an advantage to be able to look at it kind of in full scale. And I'm not going to really know until I get the whole thing laid out and get an idea of what this is going to look like in full scale. Now, I laid this out with several different spacings, and I'm still not real happy with it. Even though it looks like I have the aspect ratio right, well, the nice thing is I can move the tape, or I can put these a little bit closer together. So what I'm going to try to do is figure out where they're going to intercept the bolts. Now, the bolts are right here, so let's figure this out. Here's the bolt. Well, guess what? We're not going to be able to do this, because the bolt hole is going to be here. So what I'm going to have to do is cut a spacer, a tape that's maybe 1/8 of an inch thinner, so that these can be closer together. And that should give me, well, should, would, coulda, woulda. We really need to get around those bolts. We can't have an exhaust outlet right by the bolt. So that's going to taking my spacer tape, the tape that I originally spaced these out with, and just strip off 1/8 of an inch, relay it all out, until we get all of the holes that we're not interfering with any of the bolt holes. And that's a critical thing. Sometimes you can just work on something like this forever, going back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, but eventually, with having all these pictures and all this documentation, eventually, somewhere tonight, I hope I'm going to be happy with this. Now, as I've laid this out probably about 15 different times, I'm going to run out of tape here. I'm still not happy with this, but what I'm going to do, and I guess this is just another way to do it, I'm going to lay this out just a little differently on this side using the smaller tape. See, what doesn't look right here, even when I space this out, this doesn't look right. This should be a little bit wider and it should be closer together. But I don't want to make it any bigger. I don't want to make this whole front of the plane Swiss cheese. So what I'm going to do is shorten this, and I'll lay the other side out just so it looks more scale. Move that up into this area. See, what it is there's not enough, with this layout, there just isn't enough of the, let's call them teeth. So what I'm going to have to do to keep the aspect ratio right is move this line up and put more of these. And what I did, I tried to lay out the bottom so I'd have an extra hole, an extra little bit of air coming out the bottom, and I still wasn't happy with that. So because I have two, I'm going to lay this one out with a little different pattern, and then whichever one I like the best, I'll go with that one. And that'll probably be the end of the night here. We're working on this basically the whole evening, fooling around with this. But since it's a defining feature, I really do want to get it right. Of course, every time you change even one thing, you've got to deal with the fact that spacing on the bolts, which I just have to deal with it. There's just no way I can avoid this. But by changing even 1/8 of an inch, I change this one side that I have laid out is starting to look a little bit more like what I expected it to look like. But we only have about a half hour left, so I've got to make a decision and then think about it overnight before I cut wood tomorrow. Well, let me just, that's what's nice about the tape. Thank God, it's cheaper to buy a roll of tape than resheet the whole nacelles if you're not happy with them. Now, after who knows how many times, I realized the only way I'm going to get this is to make it more scale than I originally wanted to. Because what I have this part of it how I wanted it, but I realized the real plane, if I had, this is going to start to look like a clock, and I wanted one big outlet down at the bottom for the air. I really don't want to compromise having that, and that's going to line up right with the tank, which is going to be nice. The rest of these are going to be as scale is, not symmetrical. They're not evenly spaced even on the real plane. They're a little bit offset here, it looks like from the drawings anyway, but they are symmetrical here. So I just get a feeling that's going to be, well, as good of a compromise as I can work out. And now by having both of them to look at, here's what, when the plane is sitting on its feet, it's either going to look like that or like this. This doesn't look anywhere near as scale as that side does, no matter which drawing you look at. And I just think once that's airbrushed in, there'll be little troughs there. Once that's airbrushed in, that's really going to look pretty cool. Anyway, the last thing I'm going to do tonight, because we are at the end of the night, is just transpose this taping off onto this side, and then we'll pick this up tomorrow with hopefully a new cup of coffee and some more energy, and maybe even some snow melting, who knows. Now, what I compromised on was the bottom, of course, which hopefully we're going to get enough air moving through here. That was a big step to get that figured out, so we're not running into these cowling mounts too. That's another, which we're trying to compromise everything here, from the bottom and then from the top. And this was the main thing, was this is the view you're going to see 99% of the time. And again, I'll make a little pattern here just for my own reference. This is what you'll see. Now, I didn't want to start this tonight because it's late, but what I wanted to look at was, I want to think about it overnight, how I'm going to cut these out and then line them, I think, 64th plywood, then I won't have to put as much of a finish as if I did it with balsa, plus it'll be a little stronger. Now, you would think that isn't a big deal to lay that out, to be happy with it. Well, it was quite a big deal. And I'm glad it's over, because I'm tired. I'm ready to go to bed. I'll sleep good knowing that those are laid out as good as I can make them for now. And I think that did capture, well, again, everything here is a compromise, but I think that's going to be as close as we can reasonably get them. Now, there's nothing better than waking up to one of Karen's fresh cups of coffee. What I did, I pulled off the cowlings because I wanted to see, I laid this out yesterday, I wanted to see where these inlets are going to come in, these slices, if you will. And I don't want to weaken this any more than I have to, and I don't know how far down. This is where the cowling actually ends, the wood part, so I need to obviously get down under that by 1/4 of an inch, 3/16 of an inch, so I can get some airflow going up in there. Now, the problem is, when you look at this, because we've never done this exact way of venting before, we need to really think this through. You might think just venting a cowling is just the easiest thing in the world and it wouldn't matter how you did it. Well, I guess every one of us, and I'm just thinking now of planes that I've built that have been, let's say, we call them the fantasy planes, because in the middle of the winter you look at them and you don't need to choke the engine, so you say, I don't need a hole to choke the engine, and you don't need something else, and you don't need enough air cooling, because in the middle of the winter you're not thinking about this, like right now, today. But what happens if you don't think through exactly how you want to vent and get enough venting? What happens, maybe on a cool day everything's marginal, but then you get a hot day, and for sure you go to Texas or you go to Muncie or somewhere and you roast a motor. And a lot of people don't have the ability to diagnose when a motor's running too hot, and what they do, they run it over and over and over hot, and it's like not looking at the gauge in your car and seeing that a car is overheating. You just destroy a motor. And these motors are expensive, let's face it. Well, you don't want to, even if they were cheap, why would you want to destroy them? But what I wanted to do, there's a couple of things that would be an issue here, is I need to know that I'm going to have, especially down by the head of the motor, enough air going through there. Another thing, if you have a rear exhaust motor, and maybe, because we're at the end of this tape, near the end, maybe on the next tape I'll put what I think is my do's and don'ts of making a cowl setup. Well, in this case, we have one really unique problem, is we're going to have a lot of small vents in this cowled area. Hopefully we can make a negative pressure. In other words,
the pressure outside here will be like a vacuum cleaner sucking the air out. I'm not sure, again, because I've never done one of these, so I don't know exactly how many vents and how big they have to be. But what I decided to do is, just in case I need to make these vents bigger, I'm going to put them in what I think is a relatively scale way. But then I want to have a way that if all else fails, especially on the bottom where you won't really see it, I want to have a way that I can even make them a lot bigger if I have to. But I'd like to start by making them scale. Again, the problem with this whole thing is, if we had done one exactly this way, I would already know. The problem is we don't have enough time on the end of this tape to put that little dissertation, so basically what I'm going to do is save that for the next tape. Just give a couple hours of thought as to exactly how I want to do this, and maybe come up with a way that if I do box myself into a corner, I can always back out. If I do have these vents, because it's really going to be the ones at the bottom with the head of the motor and the exhaust are the two hottest areas. So if you can get enough air going around the head and enough air around where the exhaust pipe is, or the exhaust muffler in this case, you have a real good shot. When you have, the worst thing is to have a rear exhaust motor where there's no air going around the back of the motor. Then you just, the old days of VMAXs, you just fry one right after another. It was pathetic.
Now you can see on the Typhoon how big that exhaust outlet area was, and that worked just fabulous. I mean, we never, even the 91 running wide open, never had any overheating. But again, it's not practical for us to put something this big, and I don't think we have to. I think we can do it with a lot of smaller holes and still maintain a lot of the good integrity from the way this whole cowl area has laid out. The B25 venting seemed to work well, but then we have almost the whole ring around. It's only about 1/8 of an inch, but we have a whole ring of area. And one of the ways I tested this early on was, I have a vacuum cleaner shop vac that I reversed, and I took the prop off and just held a vacuum cleaner in there and watched, put my hand back here to see where the air was coming out. And by the way, that's the way Dave Fitzgerald wrote about that in Stunt News, of if you have a scoop of some kind and you can run some air in there, or even a hairdryer, you can feel if it's coming out in one spot. Very critical with a rear exhaust engine, less critical with a side exhaust, but still something you have to deal with. One of my learning experiences that really caught me off guard is I had built this plane and didn't have enough of a V deflector area in the back. Big Jim had specified a certain size V deflector, and I thought, well, we don't really need that. And I spent the whole season, in fact, I spent this season that I got third at the Nats here, this was in Lincoln, suffering from, anytime it really got hot outside, the motor would just sag. You can usually tell when a motor's overheating, it sounds like it's going over lean. Another symptom is you see all that black oil, burned oil all over the exhaust, the header, the pipe, around the glow plug, and you know that, good chance something's leaking there. Something that when little drops of oil hit the engine, they're just turning into, it's like a frying pan. You know you have an overheating problem then. This is one of the funnier planes. If you look at this I had built in 82, and just look at what a mistake this was. I got this giant scoop in the front, and the scoop, the air outlet was like the size of your finger. Well, needless to say, by the time we got that plane trimmed out, I had fried 2 or 3 different motors. I learned the importance of getting air to circulate around the motor. And when we started using rear exhaust motors and 4-strokes, and by the way, 4-strokes run, the exhaust runs typically 150 to 160 degrees hotter than a 2-cycle. So you really have to account for cooling. Cooling is a major thing, and I don't want to just take this lightly. I'm going to spend a couple days trying to get this as accurate as I can and make sure air is flowing in there. I think if you're building a traditional ship, the best system that I've ever found for traditional type fuselage construction is the one Big Jim Greenaway invented years ago, the V deflector. That seems to cover all your bases, and it adds some integrity to the nose also, and it's on all the Cardinal and Tsunami and Stragan, whatever plans. That's basically Big Jim's engineering. Here's one you can learn from. Look how big the scoop is. The scoop is probably half the size of an IBM card. Look at the outlet. A pencil would fill that. See, that's old technology before we really understood the do's and don'ts of designing a cowling. Australia kit has the system we use with the V-deflector, and that is excellent. If you build it just the way the plans show, that way it'll work every time. We're at the end of the video, and I don't want to leave. You know what's happened a couple of times, and I apologize for it. Is we're right at the end of a video, and in the middle of cutting something, and all of a sudden, doink, and the video's over. And it's kind of not a good idea. I like to be at the end and put a couple of minutes of something, jets or trains or air racers or something, so that the video ends clean, not in the middle of a thought. So we will hope to see you on the next video. Hope you've enjoyed this video. We're going to be doing that cowl venting on the next tape. Going to be thinking about that today. And a very special thanks, of course, to Big Jim. He really was instrumental in helping me understand some of the basic, like 101 stunt for dummies. I always consider him one of, if not the top guy in the world. Some input from Bob Palmer. What do you think? Do you think those wingtips are the right shape? Absolutely. Yeah, you wouldn't put nobler tips on anything for all the money in the world, right? Hey, George, we're talking about you. Forget those noblers, right? Ooh. That's right. And for anybody who doesn't know, Bob Palmer has an all-new design, the T-Bird 4. Going to have plans available pretty soon. Elliot's going to draw plans. Bob's going to make so much money, he's going to be coming in a limo next year.
And take us all to Dairy Queen every night.
We're going to take him to Dairy Queen as soon as we get done flying. They said Palmer can only hold one Dairy Queen. We're going to see if he can hold two. You will today. Yeah.
Silver, red, blue.
Oh, that's high-tech stuff. Believe me. Oh, George wouldn't even know what that is. No. What's that? Really? Yeah, no, he's a good motor. Good motors, baby. Well, we got to fly. I hope we got 6 in the order there. I think 4 or 5 left. And enjoy the flight. Let's hope we make it. And then it's off to Dairy Queen. Everybody.
that as low as it looked?
Yep. Yep, it was.
Okay.
And that was low.
Man, them twins sound good.